So the aim of our smart working white paper was to investigate the ways in which the space industry has had to adapt over the last 2 years. So moving away from traditional office-based roles and how it has affected our work overall. So when we say smart working, we are referring to that as a very wide term. So we looked at the implementation of flexible hours to working remotely in different locations, to changes in technology in order to facilitate this, changes in the hiring practice, as well as the introduction of new legislation right across Europe, how this has been handled in different ways. So we've looked at a number of topics within the white paper, but we were particularly interested in gathering anecdotal evidence from people in the industry in order to support um, our study, but also to determine how successful the introduction of different policies had been. So for our research, we issued a survey on a wide range of space organizations, and we asked the respondents to answer questions on how they felt about remote work, how it had changed their day-to-day operations, and if there was any policy that had been introduced in their workplace that they thought was particularly successful in order for us to determine what is working well in the industry and where are the areas that might need some improvement. So 3 topics in particular, we had some really interesting responses for those. So we're going to focus on these today. So these are the hiring of new people during the pandemic, the challenges that are associated with managing a team remotely, and how to hopefully strike a work-life balance in the process as well. So to discuss these topics in some greater detail, we have a guest speaker joining us today. So Lucia Sardo is a Director of Satellite Operations Support in Inmarsat with over 25 years experience. She has been leading a team of software developers since 2008, and she's going to speak to us today about her experiences during the pandemic and remote working and how any feedback she has on this topic. So I'm going to hand over now to my teammate, Sinea, to lead the discussion. Just to let you know, I think you've already seen in the chat is open. So if you have any questions on any of the topics that we're discussing today, or if you want to share any of your experiences, please feel free to do so. So Sinea, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Rachel. Hello, everyone. I am Sneha, Sneha Deshpande. Hope you can hear me okay. Currently, I am working in as a lead engineer at Inmarsat, and I have had great opportunity of working with Lucia before. So when the topic of sharing their own experiences about smart working and managing team remotely, I couldn't think of anybody better than her to share her experiences with us. So to start with our discussion, the first and foremost thing which requires most interaction is hiring new people. And remote working can be disadvantageous for young professionals who are just entering the job market. They can sometimes feel disconnected, and many results from the survey suggest that while some organizations have robust structure in place to support the new workers, many have reported that they don't have any of such support in place. But one way or other, there is always a room for improvement in how the recruitment process is carried out. So I would like to here introduce Lucia and ask her about her experience, whether she had to recruit new people in the pandemic or in a smart working environment. Hello, Lucia. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me. Yes, I have been hiring new people during the last 2 years.
No,
and
no,
my first
no.
Can you hear me? I hear some echo. My first experience has been really in the mid 2020. So it was the height of the pandemic. We had just been in lockdown for about 2 months. No possibility of going into the office or any such thing unless it was an emergency. So it was, to be fair, a little bit of a learning experience, both for me and the HR team that was supporting me at the time. We did a few interviews, and in the end, we decided to offer the job to one person. This was a fixed-term contract, and we explained, listen, you can be in the office and you will have to be trained and learn remotely. We did something that we've been doing normally as well, assigning a buddy to this person. So some colleague that he can refer to, or he can go and talk to in case he needs something. And I have to say, I was full of doubt about this, how it would work. I definitely decided to postpone certain type of training that we had done, like on-the-job training, because really at the time we didn't know how we could come around and do that. I have to say, it's been a good experience for me. Our candidate got the job. He's now a full-fledged staff member. He was making contribution in a couple of months since being employed. I believe the fact that we were having daily contact, and he was part of that, and he was assigned someone he could go to and encouraged to do so if he needed be, helped him to start feeling a part of the team. It was September last year in 21 when, as one of my colleagues was saying, we managed to see him in 3D rather than on a Teams call in 2D. So it's just one case, of course, but I had a positive experience from that. Maybe now hiring in this period, it's a bit different because well, we all heard about the Great Resignation. People are more discriminant about what they want from their job. They want flexibility. They want a certain degree of autonomy and so on. And actually, the employer has come to try to hire people. So very different from mid-2020, where lots of people have been furloughed or made redundant, and we're quite anxious, and rightly so.
Okay, thank you, Lucia. I would also like to ask, what difference did you experience from the new candidates' expectations?
Well, definitely, there is an expectation to work flexibly. I think the genie is out of the bottle, is not going to go back, and the day of working 9 to 5 into an office are well and truly over, especially in a sort of environment. I work in software that really lend itself to this. And really people don't see why they should be crammed in a busy commuter train when they can do perfectly well from their own home, and then maybe go into the office if when needed. So definitely flexibility is the most important thing that the candidates seem to want. And I had also some training at the time when we started working flexibly from HR. Our department was saying that they would have expected that if you weren't introducing some form of flexibility, you were in to lose about 38% of your workforce, which is really a scary number if you think about it. Other than that, I would say then their expectations are no different. They expect you to support them, to give them a training as appropriate. But the flexibility is gone, I think, top of the agenda. Recently, I've been interviewing, and most candidates, the first thing they ask me is, I'm going to work remotely. I'm not moving to London. I'm not doing a 9-to-5 job, traditional 9-to-5 job, let's say like that. But I personally, I find no problem. I think it's a gain for the employer as well. You give people flexibility, and you can get back some flexibility if you really need it as well. From this point of view, I'm really all for it, and it's been a good experience. I understand the new demands that the workforce does, the higher work. Of course, there are people that are a bit different, and one shouldn't go the full hog flexible or remote. Some people learn, we all learn in different way, and some people appreciate to have some face-to-face time, human contact, and so on. But then that is a decision that you have to do on a case by case, depending on the candidate you have in front of you, the type of person.
Okay, thank you, Lucia. Moving on to the next point of managing the team remotely. That's again another very important part of smart working. And speaking of the training, there are some studies which suggest that managers felt 50% of them they felt confident to lead a team remotely, but there were also certain portion of proportion which were saying that they were not so confident about it. And it all comes down to how many of them really received the training to support the team remotely and in a smart working environment. Also, there is very important and crucial part of supporting the team's mental health and trying to make everything as favorable for them as possible. So in this regard, I want to ask Lucia, what is your takeaway from managing team remotely, and how did you handle it yourself? How are you handling it yourself?
Well, we all went in lockdown on like March 20, and I felt that actually I was lucky because I used to work 1 day a week from home beforehand. However, I had to say I was doing all my people management on the other 4 days when I was in the office, and this wasn't a choice. Actually, I would have liked to start treating that day like any other day and having a one-to-one with one of my staff or a meeting with my colleagues. But somehow, whenever you mention, oh, today I'm working from home, everybody would say, oh, no, doesn't matter. I'll see you in the office tomorrow or the day after, and so on. There were another 4 days when I was. So really, I didn't have a lot of experience. I had some experience of remote working, but not remote management. And overall, we found ourselves in this situation all of a sudden. Well, the way I approached this was the first thing I tried to establish some daily contact time where we would come together as a team. Because we went from sitting next to each other for the whole week to each one in his own house. Some of them, they were on their own, so it is important to get to understand also what is their home situation and so on. I did like to have the idea that these people are on their own all day and having some contact, even if masked as a work catch up, was good. Second of all, and I have to say here, the company was supporting us quite a bit. The basic technology for you to work with a certain degree of comfort, so that you have a good microphone, you don't have to struggle hearing no crackling noises, echo, and so on. Having a big monitor like you use at work, and not a laptop screen, because we are all in a small laptop screen. And then things like, okay, we were having this daily catch up, and I was asking each one to, for example, try to organize the catch up, so that you know how to call a colleague, you know how to organize a meeting, you know, because, for example, wasn't something that you would do before, just walk to the desk of your colleague and speak to them. And then my one-to-ones and the standard, I would say, people management tools that you have, they carried on. Only we had to do it over a phone call or a video call. In general, after the teething problem at the beginning, people were okay. They were supportive, and I still have a little poll that I ran on Teams just a couple of months after I started this, and say, okay, now it's 2 months you're working from home. We have tried to smooth out all the issue, monitor, terminal things, remote access to work. If there wasn't a pandemic, and I ask you, how is it that how much work you need to do in the office in this condition? And I was surprised to hear that most people said, oh, I can go just occasionally, or about once a week. So people got used to it very, very quickly, and they were supportive of this way of working. As you can see, no one wants to go back full time any
longer. Perfect. Thank you, Lucia. So moving on to the next topic, which we have included here, is the work-life balance. And 50% of the respondents to our survey, they said that the social aspect of the work is also very important factor, and this shouldn't be overlooked, because in the smart working and in the remote working, it can be overlooked sometimes. But also the onus lied upon in some ways the onus lied on the managers to encourage the healthy boundaries between the work and the personal life. So you can say that the smart working is a mixture of many things, and many factors contribute to this. So having over the 2 decades of the experience of working in aerospace industry, how do you address the concerns of work-life balance for the employees? And also, I would like to know, how do you handle it as well, Lucia?
Well, I think it's clear that, especially at the beginning, the work-life balance went completely out of the window. We were sitting in the kitchen doing work and doing our everyday life and so on. And I believe we have all learned a little bit to have a bit of discipline. That at a certain point, I think you have to stop. Like when I was in the office, I got to catch the train, but now the train is not there anymore. It can become really a 24 hours a day work. I believe it. I respect my employees' work-life balance. I try not to contact them outside the working hours. And by the way, this is easy for me because we're all in the same time zone. We're all around the London area, so we all work in the same house. I understand that this cannot be also very easy to do if you have a team that is scattered around the globe. But at least I try to do that. We are the team can be on call, so they are used to a certain amount of intrusion on their personal life. But of course, no one tries to abuse it. The main complaint, people say, oh, I got too many meetings. I got too many meetings. I got too many meetings. I did, one of the things that Immer said they were offering at the beginning was a training course on how to kill bad meeting or diminish the amount of time that you do in meetings. And I try to put in practice this by inviting just the people that need to be there, or asking people, listen, there is this meeting, we need some input from you, but really not a lot. And maybe in this case, if you just are aware that there is a meeting and that we could call you in if we need your input, otherwise you carry on and do your work. Because I think being in a meeting and you're trying to do some work is counterproductive in any case. I believe we managed to strike a reasonable balance, but it's a constant balancing act. I think you have to keep looking into it, because it's easy to sleep. Oh, it's okay, but I'm at home. Let's have a meeting at 6. And bit by bit, all your free time gets eroded somehow. The other thing, I believe they also, Immersa started some courses that were quite, I thought it was interesting to help us as manager to spot a case of an employee that is, whose mental health is not what it should be, to be sensitive to a sudden change of behavior or unusual things that you notice, because as I said, I had a team that was together for 10 years, so I knew them quite well. And so this can help you just nip something in the bud and then maybe set up a special call with that person and try to understand what's the issue, what's the problem, what can you do to help if you can.
Okay, thank you, Lucia. So moving forward, so like you said, the smart working is here to stay. It's not going away, and we have to now adapt to it. So what are other understanding from yourself about the future of flexible working?
I think that we will make it better going forward, because we all started that no one had the magic wand to make this thing work, but I think human ingenuity can overcome many obstacles, and we all have seen also the advantage: less stress, no travel at rush hour, crowded office, or we already were working flexible before the pandemic, I have to say, because we had a few at desk probably than people available and so on. So as we go forward, I think we will learn and make it just a normal way of working. Probably a generation down the line, they'll think, well, you were getting up every morning, catching a train, going in an office, and then come back at 5. It will be probably sound strange for them, but there is still I think no one can deny some place for having some face-to-face time for a session where you want to discuss idea. I don't like the word brainstorming. It seems like you forget about your brain and you let it go. But definitely collaboration and this sort of team that are always remote. At a certain point, I think they all would like to come together and see each other in a different context that is not a screen. But I think the 9 till 5 is gone. And I mean, it can help everyone. I believe, not just women. Always there is this thing, women are carers, they got the children and so on. But okay, then this is a chance that anyone can be a carer, and even fathers have a little bit of flexibility and look after the children, after elderly parents, if it's another stage of your life or something like that. To me, it's a win-win for everyone, not just women that seen in traditional role. It shouldn't be. It should be for everyone.
Okay, perfect. And moving ahead, I just wanted to ask Lucia if there are any summary really or any points that you want to mention. I mean, apart from the questions we asked you, but are there anything else you want to add to our discussion?
Oh, okay. Well, I just wanted to say that I had a good experience. Of course, it's one experience. I work in an area that's really suited to remote working because software, it's, I don't know if a marketing team with different type of personality and so on would thrive as much as a software developer team like I work with. So each one of us has to make a judgment based on what job you do and the type of people you work here. And okay, what I'm telling you, it's my experience. But just be adventurous, try your own things. One thing at the beginning, maybe that was we were led to believe, okay, you can work anywhere. Okay, I'll go back to Italy like for 3 months and I'll work from there. However, I had to say that we had some warnings about this sort of thing because the legislation is really not up to speed with this, and hopefully even the legal framework will change with time. So you can't just hop and go on any country in the world. I'll go to Bali and work from there for a while. But I am sure that even this will be looked after somehow. And I don't think that the hopping and going to Bali is the main driver for asking for flexible working, to be honest. But of course, you have to be aware of this as well. Other than that, I don't know. Try whatever works for your team. Try things. If they don't work, abandon them and try something else.
Perfect. Lucia, so we've just got two questions for you, if I can pass that on to you. The first one is, do you think there is a future for in-person interviewing?
There is a future for in-person interviewing. I think I wouldn't exclude it completely. I believe it's it's nice for a candidate to come to your office, see the office environment, maybe you walk him around, meet the team, even briefly, that they are going to meet. This is not possible in a situation where you have a remote interview. So that's definitely a plus that I can imagine. Then you go and see where you're going to work. Well, on the other hand, you're not going to be there every day any longer, probably most of the time. So I expect there will be some cases where people would say, okay, I'm just down the road, or half an hour commute or something. I'll come and see you in the office. I wouldn't exclude it. It's no, isn't having a remote interview is not better than having one face-to-face, to be honest. It's absolutely equivalent for me, and maybe can be better for this reason, because you see the environment where you're gonna be working.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Lucia. And before I hand over it to my team member, just one last question from us is, do you think that remote working will have a detrimental impact on career progression for women or for young people, or that for that matter, for everybody?
I am enthusiastic about remote working, and maybe it's a bit early to make predictions. I do not see it as that should be detrimental. If your organization embraces it and they are prepared to treat you the same way, I don't see why it should make it any difference. It could be in a situation where some people work remotely and some people work in the office. This myth of the presence, you have to be there, you have to put in the hours and so on. I don't believe in it much. We all want flexibility. It's not women that want flexibility. I think this is clear, especially young people. I understand that young people might want training or certain activities or to be done in a different way. And I don't see any problem in accommodating this. I'm not saying let's all stay at home and never go out. Go in the office if it's needed for the real stuff, and not to sit in front of the computer and do our own work. So I am hopeful that it shouldn't be detrimental to your career prospects from this point of view.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lucia. Now I will hand over the session to my colleague Eva. And thank you so much again.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you so much, Lucia and Sneha and Rachel, and also to Maria Pia as well, who's in the background. My name's Eva Georgie. I'm from the UK Space Agency, and also had the pleasure of being part of this Women in Aerospace working group for the Smart Working white paper. So I just wanted to reflect firstly, Lucia, your wonderful point at the end about being physically present in the office, and how that's kind of not everything at the moment. And as you were saying that, it struck me that sometimes being present in work doesn't mean physically being there, but mentally being there. And I was thinking about some of the lessons that I'd learned from working flexibly, particularly working from home, working remotely recently, and how important it is to be there at work mentally sometimes, rather than physically. And so some of the things that you mentioned about, mental health and things like that, that's so important. These things are so important that we'll need to consider, in terms of moving forward in the future of how we work, that we almost have to take more of an approach of how we work rather than the place where we work, the physical place where we work. So I'd like to open it up, if that's okay, to the rest of the group. If you want to share any tips, any experiences, things that worked well, things didn't work well, around, you know, this smart working that we've experienced so far, and perhaps what we want to see in the future. As I just mentioned, and apologies, I rambled a little bit, but around the lessons that I've learned. Personally, these are quite, they're not just about where I'm sitting right now, they're also about how we should be working generally. So things like having a really clear work-life balance and not checking my work phone on my laptop at a silly hour, turning the screen down, you know, the laptop screen down perhaps at 5:30 or 6 o'clock if I'm lucky, not opening it again until the morning, that kind of thing, keeping a work-life balance. And things like taking a break from the screen and having really clear objectives about what it is that I want to do with work, I think have helped me to work smarter. And also making the office work for me. So if I have a full day of meetings, perhaps being in the office where it's a bit loud, if I have a full day of meetings with international partners, maybe being in the office where I just have my headset on and I'm listening to everyone else in the background. Maybe that's not so smart. Maybe I can do that at home. But if I do want to go meet a new team and establish that relationship, maybe I can do that in an office and host a meeting. So I think these are all tips about how we generally work, rather than the physical office where we work. And maybe this is the time to kind of reflect on what works for us as we work generally, and what we want to do in the future, if that makes sense. So I may pick on some volunteers, possibly from the working group first, just to put them on the spot. I've just had a really lovely message though, just to say, you know, I appreciate the point on trying to see if this is working as well. We're all in unknown seas at this point, and that's absolutely true. We need to be open to make changes. So sometimes that flexibility is also being open on the changes that, you know, that might come our way, and there's sometimes maybe a tendency to be a bit negative about some changes. But to have that open mind and think, you know, what can I get out of this? I quite like that point. And we need to be put in an environment which can make errors. Personally, I love this point, this idea that, you know, we all make errors, and sometimes it's important just to own it, and understand what we can learn from it and then move on. We're not perfect. We all make mistakes. We may have made mistakes working from home or working in the office or working more smartly. We might try out a technology that doesn't work for us, but that point of being able to learn from your mistakes, I think is so important, and it, you know, it does make us better workers, but also better humans, if I can say that. So thank you for that really, really valuable contribution. I will ask anybody from the working group first if they'd like to make any further comments on this. Putting them on the spot here.
Hi, I'm Maria Donato. I work for Italian Center for Aerospace Research. And I fully agree with Eve, and I would like to add that it's important to change our culture of work. I think that smart working is the future. Obviously, you must work in team when you are in the office, but the hybrid modality is I think is the ideal. I shared with my colleagues this working group the necessity to analyze the impact of the aerospace, and we have in the aerospace sector. We have evaluated that obviously sometimes you have to stay in the office, sometimes, but when you have a clear objective, sometimes it's better to have your own space, your time to be concentrated on your work. And often the office environment doesn't help to. It's, you can be more productive. And finally, managing your time I think is a big achievement. and you are more productive in the work. So I'm very happy that this to have this positive positive phase of the pandemic that accelerated the necessity to change our way of working. So I would like to also thank you, Lucia, for your consideration and to have gave us your experience about this way of working. I leave the floor to the people that want to put some question to Lucia to ask.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. Absolutely, couldn't agree more. So we have a hand from Susan. If you'd like to come in, please.
Hi, thank you. It's not so much a question, I've just a couple of observations from my personal experience that I hope are relevant. The first one is, so I was on maternity leave in May 2020 when the pandemic hit, and was off, lucky enough to have a year off. But I think it's really important, not just for new starters, but also for people returning, which might be maternity leave or sick leave or whatever else it might be. So obviously for the UK, when the pandemic hit in March, we went into lockdown. So I had kind of just under 2 months to get used to things, went off for a year and came back. And obviously by then everyone had spent a year, getting used to smart working, remote working, whatever. And so it was actually just assumed, because I'd been, in the company for a while, that I could just slot straight back in. And it was actually, I found it really difficult on a lot of different levels. The technology was fine, but just kind of the new ways of working and the new processes. So I think it's important, not just for new starters, but also people, as I said, returning maybe from maternity or sick leave or some other long-term break. The other thing that also kind of related to that was that just the assumption that mothers found flexible working and working from home so much better. It was just assumed that was a great benefit, which, yes, don't get me wrong, it was nice not to have the commute into the office and that side of things. But I've got 2 quite young children, one of which is still at home all the time. The other is at nursery part-time. So they were still in the house a lot of the time. And that, someone mentioned earlier, the kind of mental distraction of that, and my only suggestion, someone said, oh, just put some headphones on. Well, anyone that has children knows that that doesn't block out the sound, but also it's just the kind of the feelings of guilt and just having them in the house when you're trying to work. Whereas when I had my 4-year-old back in 2018, no pandemic, obviously it was difficult to leave her and physically go back to the office, but that kind of mental break of being in the office, I actually, in some ways, as much as I missed her, was actually a lot easier to then kind of, I think Eva said about mentally and physically being somewhere. So it's just, I've heard this quite a lot, this assumption that it's so much better for all mothers. And yes, it does have its benefits, but it is also difficult and challenging in other ways. And then something also that Lucia mentioned about fathers and childcare, which I won't go off on a rant about this, but I very much believe in equality, as I'm sure we all do, being part of WIA. And I don't think that fathers should do a little bit of the childcare, I think, as much as possible. And I know everyone has their own personal situation, but I don't think, that there's any reason the mother should still be doing the majority of the childcare. But bringing back to the point of this is, it's not just mothers or women that need flexible, working hours and locations, but also, I'm not just talking about, this is my personal experience of childcare, but maybe other caring responsibilities. That maybe the men, or definitely, should also, come under that umbrella too, so that in my case, the woman can also work as well. So it's not just giving the women flexible options to look after the children, but giving the men flexible options to look after their own children, so their partners can work too. But as I said, some of that obviously is my personal situation and opinion, but I also think it's important to bear that in mind if we're thinking about it for our employees and people we manage. Thank you.
Absolutely, those are some really, really fantastic points. It's great to see you as well. Yeah, really, really great points that are very well made and well taken. I think in the white paper, we absolutely would have loved to have delved into a lot of the detail. We do take a brief glimpse at the ways that the kind of pivot to remote working affected specific groups of people with protected characteristics. So we did look at caregivers as well, but also, you know, people with disabilities and things like that. And a lot of it is about the support that you have anyway, if that makes sense. Such as, you know, if your nursery was open, as an example, if you had a very young child, or if a medical facility was available around the corner, you know, those kind of things. And there's something in there as well about young. The question earlier that was posed to Lucia about whether this could detrimentally affect young people. I think this might be a bit of a weird thing to say, but we're quite lucky that we are having these conversations, not just about women and not just about, you know, mothers, but also that we're broadening it out and that we're thinking, well, parental caring responsibilities, like non-parental caring responsibilities, people with disabilities, like people from different backgrounds as well. And taking that approach as a manager, I think, is really important to think about, well, what does my individual worker need? So yeah, some really great points there, and I'd encourage you all to read the white paper. So well orchestrated there. But yes, I'd encourage you to read the white paper when it's available to download. I'll just read some comments that are in the chat. So Katerina, thank you for your contribution as well. Last year, the IAF IPMC Young Professionals Workshop had remote collaborations in the space industry as one of their topics. So the link to the report is there. Katerina, I'd like to invite you if there's something you'd like to say about this particular, about the workshop, if you wanted to, but absolutely no pressure. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so basically I was a delegate during this workshop. IAF, maybe some people don't know, this is the Astronautical Federation, and IPMC, of course, you can go to the link, but it is International Project Program Management Committee. And the main goal of this committee was to gather input from young professionals in the international space community on how to bridge, you know, this generational gap in the workplace and how to better develop the next generation workshop. So remote collaboration in the space industry was one of the topics, and I was part of this team. So I really invite you to read it because we prepared a report during this workshop. And basically, we base, of course, our research based on COVID-19 pandemic, because it was finally the case when a lot of workforce was forced to move to the remote. And yeah, so basically, we have recommendations in our report for example, for the health balance and socialization when working remotely. Then we have recommendations for use of technologies for remote collaboration and training and soft skills for remote collaboration. And of course, how to share knowledge in a remote environment. So for anyone who is interested in this, I invite you to read it. Our report is based on the interviews with space industry professionals. So it's not only just research, you know, but also some tips from people who went through all of this and how they, let's say, were fighting with all these challenges during remote working. Thank you.
Maybe on, I wanted to add when Susan was saying, yeah, when I had young children, I used to work from home 1 day a week as well. Try to have a bit of time for them, and it's always a wrench, the two things. But I'm not saying, but one way I did that was, okay, I had 3.5 hours round trip commuting, so I would take that the benefit of that day was that my children were staying 3.5 hours less in nursery and in care, and I wouldn't be so tired when I go and pick them up. Unfortunately, flexible working is still working, and you need. It's good to have. You have to have a separation because otherwise you end up feeling a bad mother and a bad employee. Unfortunately.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Apologies, I don't know what happened, but my browser just closed. But Katerina and Lucia, thank you so much for those comments. I did see that there was another comment in the chat, but unfortunately I don't have access to it anymore. But if Rachel, if you were able to read out that comment, and then we'll pass over to you, if that's okay, to close the session.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So the additional comment that I think you've missed is from Natalie. So thanking Lucia for her input, and thank you very much from my side as well. It's been really interesting. And about the white paper, which I will show you the link to at the end here. And then also that we all have to work on our guilty feelings and involve our male colleagues or companions, fathers in caregiving and well-being tasks, and learn how to say no and involve them in such a discussion as well, which is a really great point. I completely agree with that. So I think that our organizer does not have any sound yet. So if that's the case, I'm just going to share my screen so I can close out our presentation today. So, ooh, 1 second. Sorry, can you see the thank you slide?
Yes.
Oh yeah, sorry, sorry. Zoom doesn't tell me what it's sharing. I do apologize. So thank you so much for everyone who joined today. Some really interesting discussion there. Thank you so much, Lucia, for your inputs. It was really interesting, and for everyone who contributed at the end with their tips and experiences. I think there's so much that we can all learn from this, and I think we all need to think about how we can work smarter and have it work for us in the new, the period going forward now in the space industry, because I think there's so much scope to be able to adapt things to suit our own needs, and hopefully to make some, policy changes that will be good for everyone overall. So just to let you know that the white paper is available to download now. I'll keep the link on the screen. And the Women in Aerospace Week will continue tomorrow as well, with the gaps in the STEM education as well at the same time. So if you'd like to join that discussion, please do. And unless we have any last minute questions, I'll just say thank you to everyone who joined today, and we'll leave the link here and enjoy the rest of the week.